Arteta! What a strike! What a screamer! Zola! And a fantastic goal! Arsenal back in it! Here's Lipa, lines it up, finds the net. Arsenal in front.
I'm loath to do it, but it's time to challenge our priors. This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name's Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. Look, you know I love to lean into my priors, my confirmation bias. It's what I do. It's what I'm good at. I can get hysterical with the best of them, but unfortunately, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that today. And the reason is we have a really special bonus episode for you. We're going to be chatting with Matt Spiro about William Saliba, the transfer, the time in France, the situation with Arsenal, the subsequent time in France, and where we go from here. And maybe even a little peek ahead to the Euros, because we're going to be talking about his book a little bit as well. So I'm thrilled to do that. We will have Crystal Palace chat, because obviously the second to last game of the season, when we are fighting for 7th place and a possible St. Totteringham's Day, is content that you need. So we will have that coming up as well. So bonus podcast stuff for you this week. So appreciate that. And I know so many of you did leave reviews as we asked. We're going to be announcing some names on the next pod to send you some stuff for that. So thank you so much for doing that. That is out of the way. Good. Now I can introduce Matt properly. Matt is on Twitter at, get this, Matt Spiro. Hello, Matt.
Hello, Elliot. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. You are coming to us from lovely Paris, right?
Yes, that's right. It's lovely. They've reopened the cafes and stuff, and it's a little bit sunny, so life is looking a bit better.
Okay, so the hashtag numbers tell me that people listen to the early parts of the podcast more than the late parts of the podcast. So let's not shove your book to the back. Let's talk about that quickly. You have a book out, Sacre Bleu, from Zidane to Mbappe, but I assure all the listeners that there's plenty of Thierry Henry content in there. I am cribbing this from our pre-recording discussion. Matt, you want to tell us a little bit about the book? It's out now, and then we will get into William Saliba after that.
Yeah, that's very kind of you. The paperback of the book, it's an updated version, because initially this was meant to come out before the Euros last year, so it came out in hardback, but there is an updated version now with plenty of what's happened in the last year in the world of French football, and it is very much a book about French football. It goes from France's first World Cup win in 1998, a very Arsenal-centric World Cup win that was, all the way to 2018, and Kylian Mbappe, who was born in 98 and starred in the 2018 team, is very much the central thread in the book. And there is plenty of Arsenal content. I had the pleasure of interviewing quite a few Arsenal-related people, not least Arsene Wenger, who's written the foreword to the book. So that was a real pleasure and privilege for me to have sat down with Arsene around about a year ago now. Emmanuel Petit, Robert Pires, Olivier Giroud, they were all interviewed, as was David Dein, who talked a little bit about the French influence at Arsenal and in English football. So, Sacre Bleu, from Zidane to Mbappe, a football journey. If you want to read it, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead and find that at all your global book-selling conglomerates, of which there are many these days, and unfortunately too few of the opposite of that. But, you know, it's interesting, Matt, because I would venture to guess that a lot of the people listening from my side of the pond will have become Arsenal fans, in large part due to that French team from 1998. They were a fun team to watch, a lot of players that captured the imagination, and I think they were kind of a gateway drug to Arsenal support at that time. And obviously, what a time to get into supporting Arsenal. I know it sounds silly, but the FIFA 98 soccer football video game was one that I definitely loved to play. And, using those Arsenal players was a blast. So it is, I would say, very connected, at least on the American side, I think, to the way a lot of people were introduced to Arsenal. So I definitely think that there's relevance there. I mean, do you find that when you talk to Arsenal fans that are of a younger generation, that French generation and that World Cup team in particular had a big connection to it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's possibly the reason why I'm out here in France now, because I used to go and watch Arsenal home and away back in the 90s, and 97, 98 was, my season, if you like. It was absolutely phenomenal. I went to loads of matches, and I was so inspired by Arsene Wenger and by these French players that we were bringing in at the time. So I started specialising on French football, and I got the chance to come over and work here in Paris, and I jumped at that. And the aura, the interest over here in Arsenal at the turn of the century was huge. And And there are still a lot of Arsenal fans here in France. Unfortunately, the reputation these days isn't the same as it was 10 or 15 years ago when we were seen as kind of like these trailblazers. And now, the younger generation, I have to explain to them that Arsenal, were right up there not that long ago. And hopefully we'll be
starting
again soon.
To feel a long time ago. Yeah. Well, We're hoping to get back to the top, and there's actually a couple of players I might want to ask you about if I can be cheeky and sneak it in. I didn't put it in the notes ahead of time because I might throw in a Matteo Guendouzi question for you. But so let's talk William Saliba. And I guess where it starts, obviously, is with the actual transfer itself, because there are not a lot of Arsenal fans, I think, that will have been too aware of the player. And it was a fairly substantial amount of money to spend on a player that age in that position. So it certainly suggests that the club had a big enthusiasm for him and believed that they were getting in before the price would have been prohibitive, or a club, I hate to say this, of larger stature would have come in for him. So when you first heard about the transfer, and over on the French side of things, how was that greeted? It was, I guess, slightly surprising because he'd only played 13 starts in Ligue 1. He'd been drafted into the Saint-Etienne first team very young at the age of 17, and he made a massive impact. He was part of the youth team that went on and won the Youth Cup, but he didn't actually play it in the final because he was involved in the first team at that point. Wesley Fofana was his centre-back partner in the youth team, and he did go on and win it. Tottenham were interested, weren't they? And Arsenal came in, Arsenal got him, and I personally was very excited because what I had seen of him was hugely impressive. I mean, I commentate the Ligue 1 matches. I commentate a lot of games and have been doing for about 15 years. And I can remember commentating Raphael Varane when he played for Lens at 17, and Benzema and Eden Hazard. And sometimes when you can see a guy and you think, he looks every bit as good as the adults around him, if you like. That players are special, and Saliba really did look special because defensively he was comfortable, and he also just gave off this air of kind of authority and leadership, and you could see, and it's very unusual to see that in a young man. So I was really excited. I thought perhaps something that Arsenal haven't done enough of recently, getting ahead of the game, getting a young talent before the bigger clubs come in. So I thought it was a terrific signing. Yeah, I mean, that's some high praise, some of the players that you've referenced alongside him, obviously. There is always a tendency to go one of two directions, I think, when things don't go as smoothly as we might hope as fans. And there's going to be the people that back the club, that assume that what the club is doing is smart and thoughtful and wise, and we're just not privy to all the details that make it such. And then there's going to be other people, I don't know who these jerks might be, me, who tend to mistrust the club because of what's happened to us over the past several years and some of the chaos and disorganization in the way the club has been run, and presume that this has been monumentally screwed up. But to be fair, I think a lot of us are expressing that opinion absent the context of what's really happening with the player. And I think to get into that, we have to look back to last season, which was a really difficult season for everyone, and in particular Ligue 1, because as I understand it, Matt, the league shut down, but also because of the COVID protocols, they couldn't go train. So the players weren't training either. They were sort of stuck at home. They weren't allowed to go to the training ground. Now, I may have my facts wrong about that, and certainly feel free to correct me. It's a commonplace occurrence on this podcast. But what kind of level do you think he was playing at last season, and how disruptive do you think that shutdown would have actually been before his arrival back with Arsenal? Yeah, Saliba had injury problems last season, and that was, that's kind of caused problems in terms of the development that Arsenal wanted to see from him. He had 2 injuries. Broken metatarsal was the one that kept him out the longest. I'm looking, so he started 11 games only in the league last season. In terms of his performances, every time I've seen William Saliba play, he's impressed me. I don't think I've seen a game and thought, he's looking, a bit short of pace, or he's not reading the game properly. And in terms of that season, last season, the one game that stands out for me was the
Coupe de France semi-final against Rennes. A huge game for Saint-Etienne. They're a very big football club in France. They're still the club that's won the most titles in France, and they do have a big following. It's always a fantastic atmosphere at the Saint-Etienne games. Now, they went behind early against Rennes, and Saliba was guilty of tripping an attacker up in the box, conceded a penalty, and I thought, oh gosh, this won't be good in terms of how this game's going to go for William Saliba. And he ended up as man of the match.
Wow.
He grew in stature. He effectively set up the winning goal in the 90th minute by striding forward from the back, playing a really good ball up to the edge of the box. It broke in the end. I think it was Boudabou scored and Saint-Etienne won 2-1. And he was man of the match. And that again, to me, said this guy has got something special to, the biggest game of the season. He makes a mistake to concede a penalty. And he came back and he had a really strong game. In terms of the timeline with the COVID, I don't have exactly the information of where William Saliba was, but my understanding is that he actually moved back to London. The French league stopped in March, and he was, as he said, effectively training on his own. I think through Arsenal's kind of organisation, but not training with the first team squad. And also, the English league also stopped, didn't it, for a long period before Project Restart. And then once it became apparent that the French Cup final was taking place in July, he was then back in Saint-Etienne and looking to integrate matters, back ahead of the cup final. Now, I tweeted something about this when it became clear that Saliba wasn't going to be able to play in the French Cup final, and I knew how. Well, I knew. I had heard that he was bitterly disappointed about this, and I tweeted something about this not being a good start to a relationship, the fact that Arsenal and Saint-Etienne didn't manage to reach an agreement. Now, there was the financial aspect, which was widely reported in the UK, that if he played this extra game, Arsenal would have to pay 2 million or whatever the figure was. And that, why should Arsenal do that to give them their player, to give Saint-Etienne their, Arsenal's player? Now, my understanding is slightly different, in the reason that it didn't happen was more because of Arsenal's insistence on Saliba being in London in the days before the cup final to undergo a whole raft of medical tests, and that Claude Puel, the Saint-Etienne manager, said no, we're preparing for the cup final against Paris Saint-Germain. We need our players here, and they couldn't reach an agreement on that. So and again, I don't have this in black and white. It's an issue that was discussed between the two football clubs. But Saint-Etienne aren't stupid. I don't think they were demanding 2 million quid and William Saliba. They wanted Saliba for the cup final. They didn't get him. And I don't think it was a good way to start the relationship, because that was a huge game for Saint-Etienne, and Saliba would have loved to have played in it as his last game for Saint-Etienne. It's
really frustrating, Matt, because I think when we want to draw some conclusions about whether your club is acting intelligently in the best interest of its players, in the best interest of its own success on the pitch, its sporting success generally, you'd like to at least to be able to agree on what the truth is, right? So you can evaluate the details. I always thought that £2 million payment sounded ridiculous, sounded briefed on the club's behalf. Because it didn't, as you said, it doesn't make sense. Why would Saint-Etienne say, we want to go into this cup final against PSG. We want to lose a player that's been very important to us. And oh, by the way, we're going to charge you £2 million to ensure that we can't have him. That struck me as strange. I think if the club did indeed keep him out of playing in a cup final, and that experience and that developmental experience and the emotional high of doing that, and they may have gone on to lose regardless, but over a battery of medical tests that could have been performed at another time, that's hard to accept and a little bit disappointing. I think so. The clause existed in the contract. I don't know if it was 18 games or it was something that if Saliba played this amount, then Arsenal paid more money. I see. Mm-hmm. But I find it hard to believe that Saint-Etienne would have refused to kind of come to some sort of agreement and waive that. Interesting. Well, whatever the conditions of it were, obviously it was not an ideal situation for the player, for the club, for the relationship. And a player that we'd already invested quite heavily in as being part of our future. So then he returns to Arsenal for the preseason. I think the thing that's interesting to me is this is a guy that you're saying played at a very high level, that Saint-Etienne wanted in the cup final, and he arrives at preseason and by all rumor and report wasn't ready, was immediately sized up as not being ready to play and couldn't play and needed to go out on loan again. I'm curious your take on the quick decision by Arsenal that William Saliba was not going to be able to contribute this season based on what you had seen just a few months before, because those conclusions seem incongruous to me.
Listen, as far as I'm concerned, I think Arteta and Edu have both said it. William Saliba is not ready for Premier League football. I'm not accusing anybody of lying. Arteta and Edu have got Arsenal's best interests at heart. We're talking about William Saliba, who is an Arsenal player and an important financial asset. A lot of money was spent on it. So they're not going to be downplaying his ability just like for the sake of it, because effectively they're devaluing a player. So
they have honestly done it previously, but that's another story with other players. Yeah.
Whatever the truth, Arteta decided that he didn't want William Saliba in his Premier League squad last season, and obviously decided it would be better to have him gaining experience elsewhere. There were a number of centre-backs at Arsenal already. But for me, the argument or the claim that he's not ready for Premier League football just doesn't add up. It doesn't add up, especially where, we're not talking about trying to get into the Juventus side of the 90s or whatever. We're comparing him to Rob Holding, Pablo Mari.
Hey, Mustafi got some minutes.
Mustafi. Okay, so there were a number of defenders at Arsenal Football Club that William Saliba should have been ahead of, because of his talent, because Arsenal have invested a lot of money in this guy. The Wesley Fofana thing, you can't say, look at Fofana. Of course, Saliba would have worked because Fofana worked. They're different players, different circumstances, and what have you. But it does make it even harder to sort of to swallow this argument that William Saliba is not ready. And
because he was rated more highly than Fofana, right? If I understand. When
they were at Saint-Etienne, yes, Saliba came into the first team before Fofana, and Saliba, like I say, gave off this aura of a leader more than Wesley Fofana. I think Fofana is an outstanding, we've seen it, an outstanding young defender, but Saliba is right up there in that category as well. So I feel, living here in France, I watch a lot of French football. And I realise the Premier League is intense and it's fast, but I think the argument is a very easy one and it gets overused that the Premier League is such a big step. It's so difficult for these guys. Yes, we've seen excellent footballers in the past need time to bed into the Premier League. But for me, it's a bit of an easy argument. Ultimately, the football that is played here in France is also played with 11 men and a ball, and good footballers tend to be good footballers in England, and
it's true. We've seen a lot of
So listen. So I didn't believe that. So that makes me think. And again, this I'm not giving information here, but that makes me think that something else went down. We know that Arteta has been trying to instill a certain discipline at Arsenal. Does that mean? Again, no information here, but does that mean William Saliba spoke out of turn? Does that mean he didn't like his attitude on the training ground? For me, that would be more credible than saying that William Saliba is not ready to play Premier League football.
Right. And I want to sort of clarify something, because you said, that you're not trying to say something isn't true or isn't the truth. I'm not as concerned about, I don't think, for the most part, that they are intentionally lying to anyone. I think it is more a question of whether they're right or not, right? Because the job isn't to be honest. The job is to be right. It is elite level sport. You don't get judged on whether you were the most honest in the way you approached it. You get judged on whether you were the most successful. And I think even if they were being honest in saying they don't think he's ready, I certainly think there are a lot of people that would suggest they weren't right. And that is the question that I'm more concerned with. I do think we were coming off this period of non-negotiables, and he had frozen out Guendouzi and frozen out Ozil, and he was trying to root out the problem players, Kolasinac And, he had really gone to bat for this wage cut because we all suffer together, and they just won the FA Cup. And so he's really feeling at the top of his powers and just been named manager instead of first team coach. And I do wonder if that cup final led Saliba to brood a bit, to maybe have an attitude that Arteta felt, hey, you're young, you've never played a minute for us. I'm the boss here, and I'm establishing a culture. And you know what? I don't want to work with this brooding young kid. If this is his attitude, let's send him on loan again. Now, that is entirely speculation. But it is speculation that I think at least I can see how that may have been the way it worked, more than I can see him not looking good enough to be with Arsenal in the span of 2 training sessions. So let's move ahead a little bit in the timeline, because there's the period they don't get the transfer done, calamitously don't get the loan done. And now Saliba's with the team, and you've invested a lot of money in him, and by all measure, he's a good player. And he can't get in the Europa League, and he can't get in the League Cup, and he can't get in the FA Cup. Forget Premier League. And guys like Mustafi, who are desperate to get rid of paying to leave, are getting minutes in these competitions, and he's not. And that was a time where I think a lot of us were scratching our heads and trying to understand what the plan is. And he's playing with the reserves. There's some people that say there must have been an escalator clause in his contract that when he makes his first appearance, he gets a bonus. Who knows? We'll never know that. What was the French reaction to what was happening to Saliba during this period? Was it as incredulous?
To be honest, Elliot, there wasn't. Yeah, I mean, people were perplexed, but it wasn't something that was, making headlines.
You're saying Arsenal aren't global headline news?
No, it's that, and it's also the fact that there's probably there are so many fantastic young French centre backs. It doesn't mean that Saliba is, just an ordinary player. There was a bit of concern about him, like what's going on, but it's not something that was talked about on a daily or even weekly basis in France. Saliba sort of kept his head down. I mean, if you look at the Europa League group stage, the opponents that we had, to suggest that William Saliba wouldn't have been ready to play in that, going back slightly, I mean, I totally get what you're saying, but from a footballing point of view, William Saliba had all of the tools to be an Arsenal player this season. So that's why for me, I think Arteta saying he's not ready for the Premier League is perhaps a better way of selling it than. And again, this is just speculation. Than Saliba turned up late for training. He's annoyed 3 senior players. He's in some ways it may be protecting the player in that people will swallow it. But for me, he should have been part of that squad. From his point of view, we're perplexed. The French media are perplexed. Arsenal fans are wondering what's going on. It must have been a really tough period for him, I think.
Yeah, there's been some talk about losing his parents and the impact that may have had emotionally. And I have to be honest, I'm not really sure the veracity of those claims and sort of what he went through. Are you aware of anything like that? That is a rumor that has been extremely popular. I've kind of Googled around looking for more details on that, and frankly, I haven't really seen any reporting on it. So I'm loath to bring it up, but obviously there are people that have been out there making the claim that he went through this incredibly hard time emotionally, and that may have put him on a path where he wasn't ready mentally to be in the team.
I don't have anything to add, I'm afraid. I can't clear anything up. Okay. Perhaps because it is all a bit of a mystery, perhaps something has happened in his private life that has made things even more difficult already. For a 18, 19-year-old coming and living in a new country, learning a new language, trying to fit in at a football club where there are lots of big established names. It's well, yeah, and look, I mean, you can talk about clicks too, right? Because you have a Brazilian player in David Luiz, who's a big figure, an experienced player, and a big leader in the dressing room by all measure, and you got a guy like Pablo Mari, someone he might have taken a shine to, for countryman reasons, and you look at some of the Brazilian players that are at the club right now that he would have wanted to mentor, and just kind of looking around at who the players were in that dressing room, and Saliba coming in and trying to find someone to connect with. I would have
thought that maybe Gabriel Magalhaes coming from the French league might have been an option, but there you have another Brazilian player who would have been enamored with David Luiz, certainly, a legendary player for his national team. So I wonder if Saliba felt a little bit on the outside of a clique there in terms of what his role was going to be in the team. What's clear is that he didn't play a minute for Arsenal, and that for a player we acquired so expensively at such a young age and had a year to plan for his arrival. And then 1 year after planning for his arrival, still have no plan for him, can't get a loan done and give him minutes. Yeah, go ahead, please.
I think under Arsene Wenger, maybe it went to the other extreme in that the players were so looked after. Somebody like Abu Diaby, the poor guy, had so many injuries, but Wenger was was there for him all the time. And the way the players are managed at the moment, and again, this is probably going to upset a few people because I'm not. I got that base covered. I'm not on the training ground. I'm not on the training ground every day, but I see the guys that we're bringing over from France, and Nicolas Pepe. We saw the goal he scored in the last minute against Crystal Palace, and Freddie Ljungberg saying, "Well, he does that all the time in training." He should be doing that all the bloody time, week in, week out, and he did at Lille, and he did, and I'm not saying that is all Arsenal's fault or Arteta's fault. And, even Emery didn't get the best out of Nicolas Pepe. And the player has to take a lot of the blame, if you like, for the fact that he's not fulfilling his potential, because his potential is huge. But I just feel that in terms of the man management, I mean, it's interesting you mentioned Gabriel. At the beginning of the season, I was thinking, Gabriel and Saliba, that'll be a partnership. Gabriel, is it just me, or did the guy look absolutely class for 5 or 10 games and has kind of had doubt pumped into him? And
by losing his place to Pablo Mari, who, you can't explain it.
I just, and Arteta's learning on the job, let's face it, he is, and he's hopefully learning quickly. But I do feel that the players aren't necessarily put in the best possible conditions. Nicolas Pepe seems to, every time he has a really good game, he'll be dropped for the next 3 matches, and you just think, well, how is he going to kind of build up any confidence? And of course, Matt, people listening will think, here's Matt going on about his Ligue 1 guys, but no, but it's who he's dropped for, right? I mean, he's not being dropped for Lionel Messi, he's being dropped for Willian, right? I mean, the issue we had is Nicolas Pepe looked good at the tail end of last season, was good in the run to the FA Cup final, and how does he start the season? With Willian coming in and starting 12 of 14 Premier League games, on pace to our worst start in league history. So I do think that Arteta has shown that at the first sign of an option to go with the more experienced player, he'll do it. Gabriel lost his place to a more senior Pablo Mari at times. And, and to be fair, the center back thing has been more a partnership thing where it seems like Holding and Marie and Luiz and Gabriel. But anyway, Pepe has lost his place to Willian at times, which is, it's farcical, obviously. There's been questions about his willingness to use Gabriel Martinelli, which I think have been assuaged a little bit recently. But all of these factors weigh into how we evaluate what happened with William Saliba, and that leads us then to what he's done since going back to France. And there's really 2 components to this. One is, I think there were Arsenal fans that were annoyed to hear Saliba mouthing off a little bit in the press when he went back to France. I read it more as, the guy's back in France, he's got a microphone stuck in his face after every single game where he's playing well and winning man of the match and being asked, how frustrated are you that you didn't get time at Arsenal? And any answer he gives other than no comment is going to look like he's mouthing off. So before we get into his actual performances, do you feel he was sort of in a no-win situation from a reaction standpoint because he was going to be asked repeatedly about it? And apart from not answering the question at all, there's probably no good answer. Is that a fair assessment? It is difficult. It is difficult. He said, I had 2.5 games, 2.5 sort of pre-season friendly matches to show what I was made of. I hadn't trained properly. I hadn't trained with the team, so I wasn't up to speed. And Arteta thought that was enough to judge me on that. So he obviously feels quite hurt about that. But you're right. I mean, what's he going to say?
I've not been playing in the reserves.
I've not been playing football for 9 months. I mean, and I should have joined Saint-Etienne, but they didn't get the fax working in time. But never mind. It's just 6 months of my career. I mean, it's not easy. It's not easy. So, and yes, and I know for a fact as well that there were many other interview requests that were turned down. So it got to the point where Nice perhaps after a phone call from Arsenal, perhaps not. Perhaps it was like, can we just kind of stop the Saliba interviews now?
There's a perception. So as always seems to happen in these debates in the Arsenal world, to some extent you wind up with polarization. And I guess polarization is the order of the day in a lot of our debates, not just football, not just Arsenal. But with Saliba, there are certain people who are from afar, looking at some data, watching some highlight clips, not watching Ligue 1 particularly closely, saying, Saliba is a superstar. We are idiots. We botched this. What were we doing? Using it as a cudgel, right? And then you have other people who are like, I'm a Ligue 1 watcher. I'm a careful watcher. He's got lots of flaws. You're not seeing it in the match report. This kid's got tons of flaws. If he starts now, he's not ready. He's going to embarrass himself. And I think, as ever, both of those perspectives are probably built on biases about how they want the argument to come out. So maybe you can help settle the argument and give us a more objective view on how he has actually played since returning to France.
Yeah, I mean, I said at the beginning of the interview, I've never been kind of alarmed or disappointed having, in a William Saliba performance. And I think what he's done at Nice, given the fact that he'd barely played for so long, given the fact that he joined Nice at a really, really difficult time for the club. Vieira had just been sacked. They'd gone 11 matches with 8 defeats, 2 draws and 1 win. I did a bit of research here. They shipped 22 goals in those 11 games. And they were basically, heading down towards the relegation zone. The main reason was that their defensive talisman, Dante, who's a veteran Brazilian international and a really big presence for Nice, got a terrible injury in, I think, late November. And, defensively, they were an absolute mess. And Saliba came in. He didn't do it on his own. He did it with Jean-Claire Todibo, who's another very good young French centre-back who moved young to Barcelona and got loaned, I think, to Schalke and Benfica and lost his way a little bit, but I think he's still only 21 as well. So they got Todibo and Saliba in on loan. The two of them knew each other from French youth football. And they maybe it sounds like an exaggeration, they transformed the team, but they gave the team a sort of, a defensive platform and a calmness that they just didn't have in the weeks before it, and they did it instantly. And
it's amazing.
And I don't want to overblow it. We're not talking about top level football. We're talking about Nice, mid-table French team, playing against some good teams, some not so good teams. But I saw Nice against Monaco, which is a big game, Côte d'Azur derby, big game for the supporters. And Monaco this season are really, really very strong, and they've got a lot of outstanding attackers. Saliba was excellent, and he coped with Ben Yedder and Volland and Golovin and against Paris Saint-Germain as well. No, he didn't. He didn't look out of place in any of these games.
You're not helping lower my blood pressure over this.
No, so look, honestly, for me, William Saliba is a very, very good defender, and given his age, he should be at Arsenal, and he should be developing with Arsenal Football Club. So I've got a few stats for you. He's played 19 games in the league, played 90 minutes in all of those matches. He missed 1 game when he had COVID. He's played 2 cup games as well. So 21 full matches. In terms of Nice, and I'm not one for stats, but I got some of these stats from Opta. He's top of the stats for Nice in terms of clearances, with clearances 77. The second in the team has 45. This is in 2021. Headers won, he's top of the team, 34. Possession won, 145. He's top of the team in those stats. Hassan Kamara, the left back, is second, but he's on 104, so way behind. In terms of the whole of the league in 2021, Saliba is third in the whole of the league for attempted passes, 1,407.
Wow. Really?
He is third in the whole of the league for completed passes. We've got Steven Nzonzi and Jose Font, so obviously defensive players who are ahead of him, but still he's third in the league. He's sixth in the league for forward passes, 464 forward passes. And there you go. He does 74.1 passes a game, 91% completed.
Wow. That is great to hear.
They're impressive stats. And I would say that we talk about Arteta wanting ball-playing centre-backs. William Saliba,
Matt,
he's very good on the ball for a big guy, and he's not afraid to come out and play passes through the lines.
our good passing right-sided center back is leaving because he's 1,000,000 years old, so it's time.
Yep.
And here's this guy we spent a fortune on, who is a big talent, physically looks ready for the league, setting aside talent. He's physically a guy who can handle the league, that's for sure. His passing stats scream big club center back then, because you want a guy who can play out from the back and on that right side to partner with Gabriel. I don't know what Saliba must think if he reads these rumors saying we're after another experienced center back this summer, because it blows my mind. But I'm going to give you the impossible task. You're director of football at Arsenal tomorrow. You take over from Edu, which some of us might say would be an improvement. And so
absolutely, it would. No, I'm joking.
For you. Hey, look, I like money too. So you take over from Edu, and Arteta comes to you and says, I want to go buy another center back. And you have to respond to him. Are you going to tell him, we shelled out big for Saliba. This guy is good enough to be your right-sided center back. I want to see you try to make it work this season. Is it time for Arsenal commit to that? Or are there enough doubts in your mind about him that you'd be open to Arsenal going another direction?
Look, before I said anything, I'd give Kia Jarabchin a quick call.
Yeah, you got to make sure you know what he wants. Of course. Nailed it. Center bullseye for content here.
No, I think nothing. My answer. I mean, you have to, and I don't see any reason.
Question. I used to be an attorney. That's a leading question that would get objected to.
But Elliot, I don't see any reason not to.
Yeah. Strategically, honestly, with the money we spent, with the time we put into it, just get him out there.
Money we spent, and for me, the talent is there. The question marks are more about the relationship and the damage that has been done. And again, I haven't spoken to William Saliba myself, but I wonder if he wants to go back to Arsenal, and I hope he does, and I hope Arteta wants to get him back. I mean, Arsenal are still obviously the best club in the world, but they are still a big football club, and it is a great opportunity still for a 20-year-old looking to launch his career at the very highest level. So. I hope so, but my concern, and again, I'm like you, we see everything that people are saying on Twitter, saying, oh no, this is all good, this is Arsenal's strategy, give him a bit of experience in France. But there are some things that have happened, and they're quite mind-boggling in terms of the way that I feel he has been treated since his transfer. So I just wonder, whether he won't be saying to Arsenal, listen. I'd be quite keen to move somewhere else, and I think Arsenal would get, if they wanted to cash in, I think they could get the money back.
You do think so?
Too much trouble.
Yeah. Because I'm assuming it'd be another French team that would come in for him at that level. They're the ones that know him the best, and I just wonder if the money is in the French league right now to recoup.
No, it's not. Yeah, it's not. It'd be very difficult. I think obviously PSG. Probably Leon could, but he's a Saint-Etienne boy.
If he goes to PSG and becomes a starting center back for PSG, I will fly to the Emirates, drive over there, and sack all of them myself.
PSG are not. They've got enough other areas need to look into. They've got Kimpembe and Marquinhos, so they're not going to go in for Saliba. But no, look, I would say to Mikel Arteta, listen, what's the deal with this guy? I think he's ready. For me, he should be one of three maybe that Arsenal would be looking to play regularly. You don't want to say you're our starting defender and you absolutely have to play every game. There need to be other options. But he can play left as well. He's played mainly left, by the way, with Todibo at Nice, left of the two, but at Saint-Etienne mainly right. Arsenal have got plenty of issues to try to address in their first team, and it should be an absolute no-brainer that William Saliba comes back and starts his Arsenal career properly as of next season.
Yeah, and I mean, look, there are people that are going to say, because I've been in this debate, Matt, who will say, great, you say that. The first time he comes in and makes a mistake here and people kill him, then what do we do? Well, first of all, you can't leave the training wheels on forever. At some point, you have to go out on the bright lights and the big stage and prove it. And it's not going to be linear. But the irony is the guy who's been our most important central defender for the last 2 seasons, David Luiz, has broken records for red cards and penalties. So, it wasn't linear for him. He makes mistakes too. We're not asking him.
And the Arsenal fans would be a lot more patient and understanding. And I think they want Saliba to...
It's the sense I get, yeah.
to work and to get a chance. And if he does make mistakes, obviously if it's every game for like 3 months, we might start getting a bit tired. But people would be behind him, I'm sure.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, you mentioned Gabriel. Like, I think he's been a revelation at times. He hasn't been flawless, and unfortunately, what we've basically done instead of letting him work through that is just replace him in the lineup at times and make his position much murkier than it probably needs to be, given the start he got off to. But I think people are largely behind him too. So let's get this guy in and let's use him. It'd be a shame if we don't, and I think one will regret. I've already gone over the time. I promised you. I'm going to go longer if you don't mind with one last question that I'm going to throw in. Matteo Guendouzi is a player that I will admit I probably got over my ski tips with how good I thought he could be. I mean, you don't see 18, 19-year-old midfielders play 2,000, 2,500 minutes a Premier League season in consecutive seasons very often. And I thought he's got some things he has to get out of his game, some theatrics. Maybe goes down a little too easy, wants the ref to bail him out when he's in trouble. But like I saw a player with an elite level of skill, in my view, that could mature into a massive asset for Arsenal. Attitude was an issue before he arrived, reportedly. Was an issue at Arsenal, reportedly, and maybe even continues to be. That's unclear. Is there any regard for him in France currently? Is there any sense of how big his future might be? And I am willing to take the bitter pill now that relationship's probably broken, and maybe another time we could talk about why so many relationships between players and clubs seem to be broken right now at Arsenal. But that relationship does seem to be broken. It wouldn't surprise me if he leaves. Do you get a sense that this is one Arsenal will regret, or is it more one that this is a player who his lack of maturity is gonna plague his development?
Look, his stock is pretty high in France. I mean, he's been the captain of the France under-21s, and if you look, they've just named their squad for the final stages of the Euros, and it's a phenomenal squad, and that midfield is phenomenal. Guendouzi, unfortunately, has got an injury and is going to miss out on that, but he would have been captain. He would have been captain of an exceptionally talented squad. He clearly does have this edge, this side to his character. I don't know if brat is the word, it's the sort of John McEnroe super brat type thing. I don't know, but but yeah, he had big problems at Lorient. But watching him at times at Arsenal, particularly the times when he was doing quite well, I really liked it about him, because I think Arsenal have been too nice for quite a long time, and to see an Arsenal player get under the skin of the opponents as much as he did, I thought it was the sort of guy that Arsenal could actually do with. But his performances got quite frustrating, and people were sort of looking at him thinking, well, hang on, is he a defensive midfielder? His passing game isn't great. He's not going to contribute any goals. He covers a lot, he covers a lot of ground. And I think, like you say, he's a young player who has played a lot of football, and he certainly played a hell of a lot more than I thought he would in his first season at Arsenal. I thought he'd be very much on the fringes, and he played a huge amount. But will Arsenal regret it if he goes? They might do. They might do. I know that Marseille are very keen. The suggestion is that Boubacar Kamara, who's their current central midfielder and probably their most valuable asset, could be moved on because he's not signing a new contract, and they would be ready to spend that money on Guendouzi. So I think it would be a shame, but I think as well that Arsenal have a lot of rebuilding to do, and that if they can get a certain fee for Matteo Guendouzi, then probably, given the relationship with Arteta, probably they will look to cash in, and we'll see if they regret it. I think there's more chance they'll regret it than if Granit Xhaka moves. And
look, if you're a club that's rebuilding and you consistently say, I can't use this 20 or 21-year-old player to do that, and instead I need to go into the market, you're a club that's probably going to have a more challenging rebuild than if you just use the young talent that's already in your club. But again, I know there are people listening, they'll say you overrate his talent, not you, me, and that you underrate his disruptiveness in the dressing room. Those are things I can't speculate on right now. I have kept you too long. What I will say is that I look forward to your second book, Sacre Bleu 2, from Mbappe to Saliba, and then we can talk about how Arsenal blew it and Saliba has won 3 consecutive Ballon d'Ors. But that is for another time. I certainly hope that you will come on again.
With pleasure. It's been good fun. Yeah, well, I hope it hasn't been too negative. Look, I mean,
not remotely. I mean, look, we're where we are for a reason,
I want the best for Arsenal, but sometimes you're right. Like supporters, obviously, we all look at the positives, and we want to think that our club has a reason for doing everything, has a strategy for doing everything. But Yeah, sometimes with the Saliba thing, I mean, things have been done badly in certain areas. And I'm not pointing the finger at any particular individuals, but clearly this hasn't gone how it should have gone. And hopefully we'll start afresh this summer with Saliba.
I would absolutely love that. And, sometimes things get damaged, but as long as they're not completely broken, they can still be put back together. So this is not a finished story for him. What is a finished story is Sacre Bleu from Zidane to Mbappe. I hope you will buy it because it sounds excellent. And with the Euros coming up, I think it's a great primer for that. We'll have plenty of Euros coverage this summer, so maybe we'll talk to Matt about that again in the future. But the most important thing is buy his book. Follow him on Twitter at Matt Spiro. And Matt, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you.
All right, that's going to do it for this one. My name's Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter at Yankee Gunner. We'll have the full Crystal Palace podcast coming up as well, and lots more stuff. There's still one game to go, so you never know. It's all on the table. St. Totteringham's Day is still up for grabs, and we'll see what happens. We love you, and we'll talk to you after Arsenal 10, right in Nils.